Hey guys, you're welcome back to our series on data types and operators in Python. We've already covered integers, floats, and booleans in part 1 and part 2. In this lesson, we are going to concentrate on strings. So we will cover string methods, strings, string operations. Okay, so let's start with the strings first. What are strings? Strings are immutable ordered sequence of characters. That's it. So in Python, string doesn't necessarily refer to text. Usually, it is tempting to think that when we talk of strings, we are talking of text or words or letters. That's not the case. Okay, so you can have a number. You can write 1, 2, 3, 4, or any other number you wish. If you put it in a single quotation mark or double quotation mark, it's no longer a number or it's no longer an integer or a float. It becomes a string. So strings basically means any character, text or character or whatever you have in Python that is being wrapped with a single quotation mark or a double quotation mark. Now, let's go back to the definition. I said strings are immutable. What does that mean? When we say something is immutable in Python, what we mean is that once you create it, you can't change it. You can't add to it, you can't deduct it. So strings, once you create a string, you can either create a whole new one, but you can't alter what you've already created. So this makes strings immutable. And when we say something is ordered or characters are ordered in Python, what we mean is that they have numbers or they are numbered. They have index positions, and because of that, you can index them, right? We will later see the explanation or the application of this very soon as we progress with our lesson today. Okay. I mentioned that if a character is wrapped with a single quotation mark or double quotation mark, it becomes a string. I believe you may be thinking, hey, why the two? At least it should be one, right? But I'll explain to you very soon that any of them can be used, and there are situations whereby you can use maybe a single quotation mark or a double quotation mark, and I'll show you that to you very soon. All right. It's also important to know that Python represents strings with a short word str. Okay, in as much as we have int, that's int for integers, bool for booleans, and float for floating variable or floating data types. When it comes to strings, Python simply calls it str. So in case you look for the type of a string, you will see that Python will print out str. It basically means string. Okay, good. So let's start with examples and see how we can create strings in Python. So from example that you are seeing here, I have something like this is a variable sentence, okay? And then I said sentence is equal to then the string itself. Data science is very interesting because I've kept this whole phrase or sentence in single quotation mark, then it becomes a string. So when I run this and I check for the type, you realize that it's at str. That means it's a string. Assuming I don't bring anything, I'm not bringing any quotation mark around it, you will get an error, right? Python can't recognize it. It doesn't know whether it's an integer, it's a float, it's a boolean, or it's a string. Okay, so whatever you write, whatever data you supply must fall within one of these data types that I've mentioned. So because this doesn't have the structure of a string, it can also be classified as an integer or a float. Python will tell you that this is an invalid syntax. It can't really figure out what it is. Okay, so it's important to do that. So whether you use a double quotation sign or single quotation sign, it means the same, right? Okay, we can also have what we call a single an empty string. That is a string that has nothing in it. If you use just a double quotation mark or single quotation mark without supplying anything or wrapping it around anything, it's basically an empty string. And it's important to have this in mind because you see the applications in people's code and you may not understand how it works, but it's good to know it. You yourself may even use it as we progress. All right, so these are just more examples here. Daniel as a name. When you print it, you see the name Daniel and the class is str. Now let's look at this example. Right, we have two hash at the $, %, hash again, and we have the caret sign, 7, and then the end sign. All this put in quotation mark, and Python will see it as what? A string. It doesn't matter. The same way, if you write numbers, like let me say 564.63, okay, something like this. If I run this is an integer, straightforward. We all know that this is an integer. However, if I put this in I wrap this with the double quotation mark or even a single quotation mark and I run it, it's no longer an integer. It becomes a string. Okay, so if I look for the type right now, you realize that it's a string. Okay, I'm doing this because mostly if you're a beginner, you think strings are limited to text, right? But that's not the case. If we want to get a good definition of it, view strings as characters that are wrapped either in a single quotation mark or double quotation mark in Python. That's it. This is simple and it will save you from a lot of confusion. Great. Now, I told you I'll explain to you when to use the double quotation sign or double quotation mark and then the single quotation mark. Well, though both produces the same thing, we use the double quotation mark when already we have a single quotation mark in your phrase or in your text, right? And you don't want Python to get confused. In that case, you can limit yourself to double quotation mark. And in case you also have a double quotation mark already appearing in your text or in your phrase or whatever you are trying to write as a string, in that case, you also use the single quotation mark to avoid confusion. Okay, that's the reason why we have Python allows you to use both as your to use both quotation signs for creating the strings. Just a second. All right, so let's see the demonstration here. We have a statement here. John said single is for text and double is for sentences. This statement is wrong, by the way, but we are quoting John. So in our normal sense, we'll have to write it this way. This is the statement. John said, right? John said single is for text and double is for sentences. If you run this, you are going to get an error. Why? Python won't recognize the John said because it's not in the quotation sign or quotation mark. Okay, so if you want to make this whole thing as a sentence, the whole sentence as a string, you can, if you use single here, Python will get confused. Let's see that first. Right, let's single and then another single here. You realize that Python is getting confused. Why is it getting confused? Because this is the first mark it is seeing, so it will link it with the second one it is seeing here. So this is what Python is seeing. Only John said that Python recognizing as a what? As a string. And when you come here to, it's recognizing just the empty space here as a string. But that's not what we want. We want the whole text or the whole sentence to be seen as a string. So in a case like this, where it already contains a single quotation mark, use double quotation mark, like as we can see here, right? In this case, it sees, oops, sorry, I'm doubling it. Okay, so you see here, it's now a string. John said single is for text and double is for sentences. Okay, the same thing also applies here. Here already have a statement that says it's mine or it is mine, and you see that there's some abbreviations here. So if when you have it's mine, because of the apostrophe, right, which makes use of the single quotation mark, if you use single, you're also going to get the same error. In this case, use double, right? So the principle is just simple. Anytime you have a text that already contains single quotation marks in it, to avoid trouble, you use double quotation mark. And the same way, you have a text that already contains double quotation mark in it, use the single to create a string. Don't use the double, right? Now there are cases that you meet whereby it contains both. For instance, let's check this example. The candidate said, and I quote, "It's my turn to win." Look at this. It's my turn to win. Remember, we are quoting it, and in his statement, it already contains a quotation mark. So under normal circumstances, this is how we write it. It's my turn to win. Python will get confused. So if you also, whether you use single or you use double, this sentence already contains both, so you have trouble. So what do? The sign that you don't want to recognize as you don't want to use for creating strings, you don't want to recognize as an element for creating strings, just escape it. So how do we do that? We have the backslash in Python, which is used for escape, or we call the escape sign. So we just use the escape sign, telling Python that, hey, I know the quotation mark is used for creating strings, but this time I want to see as a text, see it as raw, not as a string. So Python will see it as raw, and when you run it, everything will work for you. Yeah. In case you are still getting confused, I suggest you get access to this particular lab. I'll upload it to Classic Data Lab GitHub repository, and the link can be found in the video description below. Do well to visit it, download it, change the codes, work with it, play with it, and you get a better understanding. Everything is free. And don't also forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, so that anytime I make updates or I upload new videos, you will be informed. Great. Let's continue. Now we have string operations. As we learned in integers and flows, strings to also have operations. Okay. But string operations are quite few, not as bulky as flows and integers. The first operation I want to talk about in strings is what we call the string concatenation, right? You have the plus or the addition sign that allows us to add numbers. The same thing is being used in strings. You can allow to concatenate strings. That means cut and paste, cut and paste. Okay. So let's say I have a string A, which is Python, string B, which is programming. And if I say A plus B, is going to basically paste them together, right? So we have Python programming like that. Assuming I want to bring a space in between them, I can create an empty string like this, okay? So A plus, then an empty string plus B, and I'm going to get Python programming. That is strings concatenation for you. Very, very important, very, very simple, but you need it sometimes when you are trying to automate some sentences or some kind of output. Okay. And then we also have what we call an empty string, as I mentioned already. You can also have an empty string and add it to another string. So the same concatenation. Okay, just different use of the concatenation. So the plus can be used on strings as for concatenation. Now we also have multiplication, string multiplication. Unlike integers and floats, whereby when you multiply a number by another number, you get something meaningful. Basically, when you come to strings and you are multiplying it, it doesn't really give you a new thing altogether. It just repeats whatever you are multiplying. So, for instance, if you say A multiplied by 3, you are saying 8 times. Repeat A 3 times. That's all. Okay. And since you have multiplication, you've seen addition, you've seen multiplication, you'll be tempted to say, okay, what about if I say 8 multiplied by B? You get an error. It doesn't make sense to Python. Okay, so don't go and say a string multiplied by a string, right? Here the multiplication just means for repetition, so it doesn't work as the normal multiplication that you know. Okay, so that's it for you. So don't also go and try other operators, other mathematical operators on strings. It wouldn't work, like division, A divided by 3, A raised to the power 3, and so on. In Python, it doesn't work like that. Okay, so far we've learned string concatenation and then string multiplication as string operators. Okay, then I would like to also tackle what we call the string indexing. Because strings are ordered, they allow you to index it. But before you even do indexing in Python, there are two main points you should take note of. Number one is that Python starts from 0. Start counting from 0. It doesn't start counting from 1. It's a 0 base indexed. Okay, so if you have something like hello world and you want Python to count it, Python will start from 0. So you have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's how Python works. In other programming languages, you may start from 1. Like 1 in some programming languages, they are 1. They start from 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. But Python is a 0 base index, so please have that in mind. Secondly, if you are taking a portion, let's say from 0 to 3 or 0 to 5 or 0 to 6, the 0 will be the first or the lower boundary, and then the last number or the second number will be what the upper boundary. Python will exclude the upper boundary automatically, so have that one in mind, and I will demonstrate that to you when we get to what we call string slicing. Okay, all right, so let's start. What is indexing? Indexing basically means that you want to call a particular character out based on its position, right? So you want to index it up based on it, call it up based on its position. So let me run this particular code here. X is equal to hello world. Assuming I want the first character of X, I will just index it. And how do I do that? Use square bracket and then the number of the index, the position. Okay, so 0 means what? I'm starting from the first one. So you say X square bracket, then you bring your 0 in. The moment you bring your 0 in, Python understand that you are looking for the first element in this string. Okay, so it returns to me age. So it continues like that, 1 and so on. So if you also want to know the number of characters, you can use the len function to check the number of characters in a particular string. Okay, like this. The len function is not just for strings. You will see it being used for other data types and structures, data structures. So it's a general function or an inbuilt function in Python. All right, what about if you call the index position beyond the last index number? What are you going to get? You're going to get an error, right? Python will let you know that you've gone beyond borders. Okay, so indexing out of range. So you've indexed out of range, you get an error. So pay attention to that. All right, then negative indexing. There are times that you want to get the last, but you don't even know the last value. For instance, if I have a whole sentence, long one, or let's say a whole PDF that I've imported and Python is seen as a string, and I want the very last point or the very last word over there, I don't know whether there are 1,000 words or 1,000 characters or 1,000 whatever inside, so I can't even know. So what do I do then? You can just use -1, right? Start indexing from the right. -1 means the last. Start from the last to the first, and when you also start from 0, you start from the first to the last. So that's negative indexing. You are doing a reverse indexing from the last to the first, and to do that, use negative numbers. Okay, so if you say X square bracket -1, you are just referring to the last letter in there, and it continues like that to the first one, right? So that's the negative indexing for you. Basically, Python uses the square bracket for indexing, and very soon we will see this a lot. We will see it with lists. We will see how to do that with tuples, and even apply this a similar thing in dictionaries. So have it in mind that for Python, core Python, indexing is done with the square brackets. There are other methods of indexing that you will see very soon. Just make sure you subscribe to this channel, and you wouldn't miss all these important things that I will tackle later in the lessons. Okay, slicing a string. Indexing, you are calling one by one. When we talk of slicing, you are taking a chunk or a portion. So for instance, I have hello world here, and I want to get the first 3 letters or the first 4 characters, something like that. I'm taking a chunk. So I will just say the first is 0, right? To the whatever number I want the third one. Now, as I told you that when in this case the 0 is the lower boundary, and then the third the last position is what we call upper boundary, but Python will exclude the upper boundary. So when I say 0 to 3, Python is going to return to me the 0 index, the 1 index, the 2, and then it will leave the 3, right? So I'm going to get something like this, with 1 L. If I want to rather cover 4, the third index, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, I should use 4 as my last index. Okay, and that's it. So this is something that you should pay attention to. Once again, I encourage you to get this particular lab and play with it. You get a better understanding by running the course yourself. Or that if you don't know how to open an existing Jupyter notebook, please check my previous videos. I have done tutorials on that from scratch, how to even install Jupyter Notebook, how to navigate through Jupyter Notebook, and how to run codes in Jupyter Notebook, whether from the first time or a new Jupyter Notebook or an existing Jupyter Notebook. Kindly do well to check those videos, and the link can be found in the videos description. All right, so let's continue with it. So this is another example where I'm taking from the set index, the second index to the set index. In this case, it means that it's going to bring me and at the fit 1. Okay, so 2, 3, 4, 5. It will exempt the set index, as you can see here. All right. So that's it about slicing 2. Let's move on to what we call the constant interval, indexing at a constant interval. Let's say you want to return every third character. So 1, 2, 3, come, 1, 2, 3, come, 1, 2, 3, come, something like that. If you want to do something like that, then it's very, very simple in Python. So for instance, we have the hello world here. Let's say I want to return H first, which is the first one. After that, any third value should also be brought out. Okay, so I have H here, 1, 2, 3. Then the second else will come. 1, 2, 3. The W will come. 1, 2, 3. R will come, or L will come. Yeah, something like this. You know, it's 3 spaces. Okay, so just bring your square bracket, a double columns. Okay, first column, second column, and then the value. It's if 2, bring 2, if 3, 3. So I wanted to do it, bring the third value. So around this one, you could see that the H comes, L, W, it flows like that. Okay, this is very, very important to know. It doesn't only work with the core Python, even with pandas is there. There are times that you want to return, okay, I want the third value of every week, maybe every Thursday, every Wednesday, or something like that. There's a way of using this kind of indexing to do, and in some programming tests you'll be required to do these things. So it's very, very important that you understand these basic things here. Okay, so you can change the number to see the effect. So let's change this to, let me say 2, and you will see that everything will change. You get it? All right. Now let's go to string methods. Methods, for lack of better words, or to help you understand it from scratch, I would say that methods are basically actions that can be performed by or performed on an object. Okay, so like human beings, I can talk, I can sing, right? These are actions that I can perform. There are other actions that can also be done on me, right? You can pinch me, you can tease me, you can push me, right? So when it comes to Python programming, the same thing happens. When we talk of a method relating to a particular object or data type or data structure, it basically refers to action that can be done on that particular data type or structure, or can be done by that particular data structure or type. Okay, take note that methods are also similar to functions, but I don't want to take you ahead of where we are going to, right? We will later learn functions, and we'll later also dive deep into method when we get to what we call object-oriented programming. So don't worry yourself about these terms, just understand them as you can see over here, right? Just get the basics. So for instance, if I have a string hello world, I may want to count, right? It's an action that I'm going to perform on the string. I want to count the number of O's that I have in there. I'm not going to be counting 1 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In this case, what should I do? Just use the count method. So x.count. In other words, the string dot count, and then the character you want to count is O. It will count it for you. How many O's do we have in hello world? We have 2, right? It's lower. Checks whether your string is in lowercase or in uppercase. Okay, so when you say it's lower, you're just going to return that either a boolean, going to return either true or false, right? It's not lower. But when you see lower, it means that you are returning a copy of the string in lowercase form. Remember, I'm saying this because it doesn't change the original, right? The original is what it is. Strings do not change once you create them, but it can return a copy to you when you're using the methods. Okay, so if I come here and I also use the .title method, it just means that every letter, first character in the word should be written as what? In caps. So written in caps. and that's what you're seeing here. But it doesn't mean that this has affected the original. If I call the original right now, it will still be in lower cases. Okay, so if you rather want to have this, to save this or store this, just assign it to a new character, variable. So for instance, I'm assigning this to y. When I now call y, it will return to me the title form of hello world, as you can see here. But the original x will never change. Okay, it will still be the same. You can't really change it. It just returns to your copy, but it doesn't change. Okay, all right. So upper is upper 2, checks whether it is an uppercase, and then upper rather returns a copy of the string in caps. Okay, it's title. You've already checked title, so I'm not going to mention that. And then the index, let's say you have O, you want to see the position of O in there. Basically, it will return to you the first time you see the letter O in there. What position was it? It was in the 4th position. Okay, let's move on with more examples, and let's have this particular sentence here as a string. There is a package called pandas used for data manipulation. That's a string, right? Now, if I have this and I want to analyze, let's say I'm working on a natural language processing, right? Things like that. You don't use sentence all the time. Sometimes you have to break everything into words or tokens or something like that. So we want to split this into words or text or characters in the basic ones. You can use the split. The split will automatically breaks them based on the space. By default, it will separate them or break them based on the spaces in there, right? But if you don't want to use the spaces, you can specify what element it should base on to split it for you. That's the split method. Very, very important. And I cannot overestimate the importance of the split method in strings. Okay, so when I do this, that's it. Here I'm splitting based on the comma, so you could see that I splitted it into 2. There is a package called pandas. That's the first part. Second part is what? Used for data manipulation, because of the comma there, right? Great. That's it about strings. So we've learned strings definitions, what they are, how to create strings, string operators. We've also learned about indexing and slicing in strings, and we've ended with string methods. But I want to leave you with some tips. Okay, regarding the string methods, you realize that even though you didn't even go too deep into it, already you are confused as do I have to memorize these methods? Do I have to keep them all the time and even know what they do? No, you don't have to worry your mind like that. Okay, anytime you have, not just for strings, but any object in Python at all that you want to know what methods can be applied on it or by it, just do well. For instance, I have strings sentence here. Just bring a dot in there before it and then press on your tab key. Okay, if you do that, it will pop up all the methods that relate to that particular object. So here you could see that we have the lower, the is lower, is title, upper, join, low, L strip, R strip, R split, and so on. All these are methods that can be applied on strings. Okay, and the next question would definitely be, hey, for instance, if you have the strip or we have something like upper, how will I know what it does? Its function. Okay, well, if you want to know any method relating to a particular object or character in Python, just use the help function. So for instance, I saw the upper. I don't know what the upper does. I can say help sentence.upper and run this, and Python will produce a documentation telling me what it does. So it says that help on built-in function upper method of built-ins.str instance returns a copy of the string converted to uppercase. So the last sentence is usually what we are looking for, right? So that's what it does to you. What about if I say strip? Okay, we didn't tackle the strip method, but what about if I say strip like this? You could see here it's telling you that if characters it says that return a copy of the string with leading and trailing white space removed. Okay, so let's say the ending that you have like some white spaces over there, you want to clear off those empty spaces, the strip method will do that for you. And if you don't even want to, let's say you want to move characters apart from white spaces, you can specify those characters. I want to move all the comments at the end of the sentences or something like that, and it will do that for you. Okay, so the help function is something that will help you a lot. You don't have to be keeping these things all the time, and by continual usage, all these become part of you, so you don't even worry too much about these things. Okay, and if you don't want to even use the string name like we have here, you can just use the str, let's say string.upper. That's all. This is the method. So instead of using sentence, you can say str.upper and put it in the help function. Remember, I didn't bring the curly brackets or the curly brackets. You just have to call the name alone and it will supply you what it does. Okay, so that's it for today's lesson. It's been very, very insightful, and if this is your first time of visiting this channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified anytime I upload a new video, update a video. Let's meet in our next video, where we'll focus on what we call string formatting, a very important concept in Python programming. See you then. Bye for now and happy learning.